Hello, hello, friends. Welcome to the Odd Thoughts Podcast. At the Odd Thoughts Podcast, we like to talk about the everyday odd thoughts, discuss whatever comes to mind, and have conversations on relatable topics. My name is Gunther, and I am your host. Thank you for tuning in to episode 26. For episode 26, I wanted to talk a little bit about making the right choice. Often we are faced with difficult decisions, and the right choice isn't always super obvious. So, hopefully, even when we make the wrong choice, that we have the chance to redeem ourselves, whatever right and wrong may be. Then I transitioned into talking about an article that I had read about a man's plea to TikTok to take down videos about his mom's murder case. And it brought up a bigger question of the true crime obsession that people have nowadays. And does it go too far? Can it be harmful to others or be harmful to yourself? Then, thirdly, I wanted to talk a little bit about maybe the possibility of real life superheroes. I would think it'd be nice to have people to come and serve the public and fight off evil, and it's kind of fun to think about maybe the possibility of superpowers, but it may not be it may not be always that exciting. And superheroes may mean supervillains. Then I wanted to end it on talking about becoming a vampire, playing upon that kind of idea. You know, you know, thirst for blood, living forever, living in darkness doesn't really seem that intriguing. So I thought it'd be fun to kind of talk about that. If you want to listen to any of this, any of these topics, I appreciate you tuning in. Thank you for stopping by. Please enjoy. But how's everybody doing? I hope y'all are doing okay. I appreciate y'all stopping by every single time. I have fun hopping up on the microphone, talking to everybody, and I really am glad to see y'all. I just want to tell y'all that I'm glad that you're sitting down with me for a moment, just for an hour. I can see that you're tired. I can see you're exhausted. I know that life has been throwing some stuff at you lately, and you're doing all you can. All of you is doing so much already, and you're putting in the most effort that you possibly can. I see it. Other people see it. Trust me. You make lots of sacrifices just to make it day to day, just to exist every single day. You know things need to be done. You know surviving is important, and life doesn't just stop for you. Time doesn't just stand still so you can figure things out. It's not for nothing, though. We've learned that resilience and endurance is what makes us great. We've learned that humans can put up with so much and continue to push forward. Just look at the thousands of years that we've already existed. The miserable parts of life do take away from you. That we don't ignore that. But you're alive. You're here. You're existing. You're doing what you're doing to the best of your abilities. You've shown that you can handle a lot, and I know you can handle a lot. I've seen how strong you are. I've seen the capabilities that you have. So, while you're here listening to the podcast, I want you to just relax for a little bit. Know that you're doing enough. Find relief in that you're doing great things. Your impact is felt, not just to yourself, but to people around you. So, thank you for being here. Thank you for chilling for a little bit. I'm doing okay. Thank you for asking. I've been really working hard on trying to figure out something else to do in my life. I've kind of just got the podcast going. It makes me feel sometimes a little bummish and a little lazy that I'm kind of only focusing on the podcast. But I'm transforming, I think, the way I've thought for so long, and I'm currently in this part of myself that's have a certain kind of force going where I have a kind of a creative kick, and I'm trying to feed that as much as possible. I see that what I'm doing right now, not only with podcasting, but hopefully with whatever else I kind of continue to do, is that I see kind of a higher ceiling with it all. I know that I can go back and work like 9 to 5s and go work at an office job, and I really don't like shun that existence at all. I would be pretty fine with that existence, getting a few promotions and making sure that my kids have a good life when I have kids. But right now I have an opportunity to do something else. I have a little bit of freedom right now. I kind of have a little bit of I'm a little bit alone and it's a little lonely, but being my to myself hasn't hurt me in this current moment. I haven't really hurt myself too much with overthinking. Sometimes, I'm a natural overthinker. There's always going to be something to get emotional and worked up about, for me at least. But 100%, I find myself being a little more clear-minded, or at least I have a place for things in my mind. It doesn't feel all cluttered. So I've been working hard on trying to figure out what the next step is. I want to do more content on YouTube. I always look up on Reddit. I always look up random shower thoughts. There's our subreddit, shower thoughts is what it's called. I don't know if it's called random shower thoughts or shower thoughts, but it's the random questions, stuff that like I don't know if I would necessarily put in a podcast, but if I filmed like a short video, and that'd be cool. Then it'd be kind of fun to kind of do a little short form content. Also give me a chance to kind of put myself on camera, which is something I've kind of, I'm trying to do, but it's been a little hard, especially with the podcast. I'm kind of stuck in between, like, I don't necessarily need a visual aspect for the podcast. Like, I would like one, but I don't need it. So, but I would like to show myself more often. I feel putting a face to more of my content and more of who I am would be something. And also, not only doing these kind of random shower thoughts, really honing in on the odd thoughts thing, but also maybe trying to be a little more serious. And I get serious sometimes in the podcast, but I do want to try to keep the podcast as light to certain points. I don't want to get ever too political or too much of that, you know what I'm saying? And I don't ever want to point the finger at people and tell them this is how they should live, or this is if you're acting this way, yada yada. I don't want to be that person. And I still question that but I have opinions, and however much my opinions matter, I don't know. But if I'm going to be an opinionated person, or if I'm going to ever have my own, take on certain things, I would rather do it outside of the podcast. And I'd rather show my face when I do it so that people know when I'm saying something that is what I'm saying, not hiding behind the computer or behind a microphone or something like that. So I'm thinking about that, but I'm also kind of putting myself in the mindset of kind of want to try to I kind of want to try to write a book. I've always talked. I've been working on short stories over the last few months, and I get so kind of wrapped up in expanding these stories too much. Short stories, I feel like, are supposed to be snippets in a bigger tale or whatever. So I kind of find myself thinking about the bigger tale, and I'm trying to feed into that a little bit. I'm trying to figure out how I'm gonna how my writing style and what I want to write about. And one of my favorite things to think about is kind of world building and character building. And you just pick the start, how the story starts, and you pick how it ends, and just figure out the rest in the middle. Just connect the dots. So that's what I've been kind of doing, is like thinking of like the beginning and the very end, and just trying to see if I can formulate that and then pick whatever randomness in the middle type thing. Not random to where it's going to throw anybody off, but to where I can create something and kind of, expand it as big as I want. I was looking at like I was looking up at like how long some of my favorite novels are, and a lot of them are like 200 pages. And I was like, I could do that. But then I looked at like The Shining, and The Shining's like 400 plus pages, and 400 pages is a lot. But I think if I got into that, once I get going, then I'm not going to stop, right? I just got to kind of get into the mindset of being able to stop and start with writing, which is something I struggle with, which I got to get better at that, which is going to help me write a book, because I need to be able to stop a certain point of the story and be okay with maybe reiterating it and re-envisioning it, or stopping and remembering where I was and continuing the story, keeping it congruent and keeping my continuity together. So I've been thinking about that, just trying to dive into it. Like I said, I'm just trying to capitalize on this moment in time I have right now where I want to be creative, and I just have this vision in my head of a ceiling higher than what I could be doing at a 9 to 5. I'm not saying that there couldn't be a high ceiling at that, but right now in my head, I feel like, and right now in time, I feel I am most serviceable to this cause, to keeping a good podcast going, and trying to write this book and do further things. Like, I want to do voice acting, and I got to build up the confidence to do that, and maybe even do acting, or I just want to make films. You know what I'm saying? So I just have I have the picture in my head, and I really do. The end goal seems so freaking far away, but it's not like I don't have it envisioned. But I'm making my way towards there. Yeah, but no more rambling. Sorry for rambling a little bit. We'll hop into episode 26. We are destined to face difficult decisions in our life, many of them. Not all is known. So we're going to have plenty of mistakes and missteps and missed opportunities for sure. And I think something that is difficult is making the right choice. The right choice isn't just a blatant thing. It's not something that's always known right off the bat. Or even what right is in the moment isn't necessarily what's right in the long term. Even when we think we know things, we're not right. We don't know anything. It feels like for some things. We're always kind of seeking, maybe more so, the most suitable outcome, what we view as the right choice. What's best in the moment, and like I said, not always best in the long term. Fortunately, we can sometimes redeem ourselves, right those wrongs, but we're only human. So making the right choice is maybe a subjective thing to think about. What's right? What's wrong? But I always think of it more so in the terms of what will suit you in that moment. There are some objectiveness to what's right and what is wrong sometimes. I think the wrongs are always going to be a negative impact in some way, right? When something is a wrong choice, you'll see it pretty quickly, it feels like. And hopefully you have that chance to make a right choice. But then sometimes that right choice doesn't always feel right initially. But it's always the point of doing your best, kind of. I think the whole point is that you're going to go through a lot of stuff so that you're always ready to try to make a choice. So like I said, only doing your best. There's only so much you know. There's really only so much that we can do at times. I feel quite often I've been backed up into a corner where I kind of had to make a quick choice, or I just didn't want to deal with something for the moment or anymore because it had been, tasking me for however long. So sometimes it's so quick to jump on something, or sometimes it is maybe obvious, or at least in that moment, it's something that feels the most appeasing, that thing that feels like it's going to be the best solution in the moment. That's a big question in the moment. Short term decisions often maybe a little easier to make than those long term decisions. You can kind of, what do you want to eat? I'll eat this. Maybe a long term decision in the term of like maybe your stomach's not going to feel good later, but that's a short term decision. Long term decision and where you move, right? That's a little more difficult. And obviously with varying varying weights of questions. It's not always just so simple. Things can sometimes be hard to even the question is hard to even conceptualize, right? Conceptualize. I felt a little weird saying that. Sorry. So you're confused by the question, right? It may not be easy to come up with an answer. And so for you kind of just say something. You make a choice that may not be right. There's some sort of hope that people put in some sort of work, right? That you go through, like I said, you go through things, you suffer a little bit, you make those mistakes, those missteps, you you make a few wrong choices so that sometimes it makes it so that maybe it makes those right choices easier. Sometimes it may make those right choices a little easier. But I quite often I suffer from executive dysfunction. I have like, choice paralysis, if you will. It just feels like I feel of all these outcomes. I think of all these different things that can happen, and if I say this, then this will happen. And I know a lot of other people feel that way. Sometimes there's so many connections you're making, and it really wasn't a simple question or simple problem to take on. But but there's fear of past mistakes that loom, and maybe that even hurts with that kind of executive function. Makes it like, oh well, I've already messed up before on these certain things, and I'm not very confident at making decisions based off of what I've done, or I'm not good at solving problems. Like I said, we always do our best. That's kind of the whole point, is what's right for you. And we have to accept the outcome. Undoubtedly, you're gonna have to. It's there's always gonna be multiple ways you could have done something, right? And there's probably always gonna be a wrong decision waiting around the corner, or even sometimes it was really a good decision, and other people tell you so too, right? You're not always up by yourself when you make these choices, when you make the right decision. So other people sometimes swayed you. You kind of have to be your own person, obviously, and say, hey, this is what I believe, and understand what you believe, but other people can help feed into you accepting a certain choice, a certain decision, making a certain choice. But like I said, accepting the outcome, you know that it may not be a perfect scenario. You may not understand what you are going through, the full question, but you're kind of just doing it because it needs to be done. You can't just leave things undetermined, I feel. For a certain amount of time, it may not affect you, right? For you may be able to ignore a certain question or a certain problem, a certain, task in your life, a certain situation, but it comes around. It always feels that way. Life kind of has a funny way of doing that to people, that life always reminds you of how human you really are. You got things kind of go good going on, then bang, throw you a little bit of a curveball. But we're only capable to a certain point. Some people are always going to be a little bit more. Some people are more decisive too. They're always going to know. They're always going to just make a choice and accept that. Well, it may not be the right choice. This decision that I've made may not be the best outcome for me, but I always say that hopefully that you can right those wrongs. That's a great thing to hope for, is that maybe you can redeem yourself. I often leave that's outside of my mind a lot of times, is when I make a decision on something, or I try to choose something and feel I always feel I always feel backed into a corner even when it's simple. It's that executive dysfunction, like I was saying. But I know that I may have a chance to redeem myself. It's hard, it escapes my mind so often, but quite often afterwards, when I've sat on something and I regret just missing an opportunity to make a decision, or the choice, me not making a choice then became my choice, right? I always think about, then I can maybe right it. I can right that wrong. I think humans can surprise themselves a little bit on redeeming, on redemption factor, and just know that the mistakes that you make, and you make a couple wrong choices, doesn't make you bad, right? Doesn't lessen you as a person, doesn't make you stupid, doesn't make you incapable, and making the right choices doesn't make you better than anything. Doesn't mean you're more capable at things necessarily. It makes it feels though sometimes that when you're a little bit more of a decisive person, that it feels like you can handle things a little bit more. When you're a little indecisive, it feels that you worry about how you're going to handle certain situations. But I don't think that pertains to who you are. You can become better at handling different situations and solving problems and making certain decisions and being definitive in what you do. You can become better at that. And some things may be better than others, right? Sometimes you're just not good with certain things, but other things you're quick to think about, right? You're just like, oh, I know this. I got this. I can choose that. This is what I pick. It's just sometimes easier that way. A lot of people who feel like they've always been right, when all of a sudden they're wrong about something, the world's come crashing down, right? We don't want that. It's all part of being human, baby. That's what makes us so great. It's the fact that we have it's a little bit it's what free will kind of is. It's kind of the fact that you get to choose some things. Some people have the varying beliefs in free will. Some people believe a lot of things are predetermined. And maybe so. Maybe a lot of things are predetermined, but it feels quite often because of how often we are left with making decisions, and how often we come into situations and we are dealing with problems, and it feels like that we're always going to have that chance to make a choice and display that free will more so. Sorry, I was trying to think of like what I was going to say there, but we'll have our chance to show off free will. We just know that we face so many things that you're going to have your opportunity too. Like I said, maybe some things are predetermined, but yeah, in making the right choice, that's not always going to be an easy thing. Right isn't always as simple as this is the definitive thing. Wrong isn't always as certain as a definitive thing, right? You think about it might help you in the moment and it may not help you later, but you still have to accept it. It's best to just decide, make a choice for yourself, and not let someone else or the situation itself to pick a choice for you. It's hard to take control. We all are doing our best. We're all capable to a certain point, and we're maybe going to know how to do things better than other things in our lives. So just make sure that you're always just working through things, right? The right choice is more so, like I said, it's more so about what appeases the moment and maybe what is most suitable for that certain time. So choose that. Choose what's most suitable. You'll always be faced with different questions down the road, and you might have a chance to right that wrong. You might have a chance to live off that right and prosper from that choice that you made. But like I said, I don't know what right is. I don't know what wrong is. Obsession with true crime has spanned for years. It feels that more in recent times with social media, podcasting, the internet in general, it feels that there is a wider audience for it, a wider intake of content. And also with the internet as a tool, you kind of can become an investigator in a way. You can do your own diving into true crime topics. But can that be too much? Can that interest that you have in true crime be harmful? Sometimes people freak themselves out, and if you have anxiety real bad, that you look up all these true crime things and you can become scared. Be scared of people, be scared of situations. But also, what about other people? You may be thinking about posting a video about a certain case you found, a cold case or whatever, but there are people that are still affected by some of these cases. Some people probably watch these videos they see about true crime, and they quite often think to themselves, hey, I'm still feeling a bit emotional from that. And it may bring up all this pain that they still feel. And I was thinking about, quite often I see a lot of this, right? For years, even throughout my whole life, there's been true crime shows, and now on YouTube, it feels like, and all over social media, it feels like it's just so prominent. Everybody, I think, has a little bit of an interest in some sort of morbidness. You don't necessarily want people to be dying so you can do true crime topics, but you kind of are interested in it, especially when there's a crazy story behind it. But a lot of these people had families, right? Especially when we're thinking of just like murders, these people have families. These people are still affected by this thing that happened. So imagine if you had someone in your life that was, you know, a victim of some sort of true crime thing, of some sort of crime. I keep saying like true crime thing, but some sort of crime, some sort of nefarious activity. Some years passed, and all of a sudden, you see it on YouTube. You see someone doing a video about it, about how weird it was, and maybe they mentioned your name. That could be kind of weird. So I was reading an article a couple weeks ago, or maybe it was like a week ago or something like that. And the article was on Insider. It was done by a woman named Lindsay Dodgson. I hope I got that right. And it was a story that was talking about this woman who had been killed. She was 73 years old. Her name was Odessa Carey, and she had been killed by her mentally ill daughter, who was 40 years old, and she has a son as well. Her son's name is Lawrence, and he's 57. And the article was more so talking about Lawrence, talking kind of about how he wished that people, specifically on TikTok, would stop talking about his mom. He had seen like some true crime TikToks about his mom's cold case, and it brought up a lot of feelings for him. And it was kind of a sad story in general. I guess I'm kind of feeding into a little bit of that true crime ness with talking about this article, but it was really an unfortunate event with this woman, Odessa. There was multiple failings by agencies and in hospitals to give the daughter proper care. The daughter was schizophrenic and literally struggled for so long. And the son knew it, and the mom knew that she was a danger. But people just kind of ignored it because of XYZ. I don't really know. But she was a harm to herself and eventually would be then become a harm to other people, her family specifically. And a lot of and that's an unfortunate thing. And you have to do this a whole different grieving when you know maybe it's your own sister killing your mom or something like that, or a family member killing another family member, right? So then, like I said, imagine then all these years later, you're scrolling on social media and you see your mom's face on a video, and you're like, "What the hell?" You're like, this is my mom," and they're talking about it, and they're talking about your sister, and even though you know that she's this person, that it's got to be kind of weird. It probably brings up so many memories, not suppressed at all, even, right? I've never been through something crazy like that, so don't imagine those feelings are easily suppressed. I don't think so. I wouldn't imagine that. And it's kind of crazy as the article was talking about the guidelines on TikTok, and a lot of social media sites do like prohibit gore and other gruesome content and whatnot, but for some reason there's kind of this looseness when it comes to just talking about the topics. And I don't want to really ever point out the finger and saying that these people who do true crime topics and have true crime discussions and post those videos, I don't ever want to say it's an insensitive thing, right? Everybody has a peak interest in a little bit, not necessarily always in the morbid things, but that's what some people like. And some people have that investigativeness. And I remember when I was a kid, like I used to look up like famous serial killers and try to figure out their motives and try to figure out just things like that. Watching those true crime shows, and you try to like as you go along with the detectives in the show, you try to solve the crime yourself. I think that's like something we kind of all do when we watch that type of stuff. We maybe think that we can offer a different eye, a different thing. And I really only believe it's maybe highlighting these cases in the sense of informationalness, you know? You just want to tell this kind of crazy story, and you're given as much information as possible. At least some people. I have seen some content where it feels like people are kind of making like like a show of it and making fun of it a little bit, and it's like and it's just I don't know. I think sometimes with true crime, you kind of be a little serious because it's dealing with people's problems and lives, and other people are still affected by it, right? So that's a big question. So the son was talking about like he just wished that people would stop, and he was kind of bringing upon a bigger question of it being a bigger sense of it for a multiple people. Sorry, that there not only is he the one person suffering, but there's got to be tons of other families that go on social medias and find true crime videos about lost loved ones, and it's a grander scope. I think we think of it, we just don't think of that. But you got to think for every like cold case or every crazy thing like that, that there is a family attached to it. There are still people reeling from some such tragedy, and I'm sure they probably in general avoid that true crime content 100%. But I know in my personal, I don't, I try not to invest too much in that stuff. It gets me a little sad, and it makes me feel a little. It does feel a little intrusive. It feels that these things are kind of personal, and even though sometimes it is played to the public, right? Like, newscasts happen when murders happen, right? So not everything is super private. So it almost opens it up to like a free range then because the news covered it, or it was a kind of a big thing in your town that, or in a town that it opens it to a free range of discussion. But also maybe some people don't mind that. You could also think about that people don't feel it's that bad that they watch these true crime things and they see a topic about someone they knew, a loved one, and they don't feel so bad about it. They appreciate someone shouting it out, or maybe they themselves have all these questions, and this this internet detective, kind of this internet investigator, solves it. That's happened before. Some people are good like that. You got to give people a lot of credit. Just because they didn't go to law school or, pursue a detective career doesn't mean they don't have the skill set for it. Some people are just deep divers like that, and I think there's maybe some sort of thankfulness for it. It is kind of a trend now with the whole true crime thing. There's always, like I said, there's always been an obsession with it. It feels like it's been for years, but it's been in true crime novels, right? So people have always been interested in it. It just feels with the internet that it's splayed everywhere a little bit more. Things can be maybe seen more as trends. So really, is it a trend, or can you really just think that people are just interested in these things? I'd hope that people that do true crime, things, content, that they really are interested in trying to go in depth in a case, and maybe they have a certain intrigueness to it by it being a cold case where it's unsolved, or all the circumstances just feel too weird. That's where the peak interest usually comes from, right? Is there's something wrong with this case, and there's something wrong that happened, or it just doesn't feel right, or why is it unsolved? What happened? Why can't people figure this out? So I can understand both sides of it feeling a little bit intrusive, but also I can understand it feeling like it could be a thankful thing that it could solve some of these cold case things, especially if it's been long enough. People may not know that about past family members that have been, murdered or been part of crimes like that. But it was sad to think about this man playing and hoping that he doesn't have to come across those videos. Doesn't mean those videos are going to stop, and he may see more in the future, but that does bring a question of that, why, what's the obsession with? You're kind of bringing up all these things, and it could hurt other people, but people unfortunately have this piqued interest in it. You can't say it's insensitive all the time, especially if they're not making fun of it. If they're trying to solve something, then it wouldn't be seen as insensitive. But it does often disobey the guidelines for a lot of social media. You can't post gruesome videos and gruesome photos, but you could talk about gruesome things. So that is a little bit of a question. I don't find that true crime is going to stop, but when does the obsession with true crime go too far? It's something to think about. You know, superheroes and supervillains may only exist in comic books or in movies, TV shows, any sort of popular media or popular culture like that, but it's kind of fun to think about if we had real life superheroes. People to come save the day from evil or fight off those evil forces and serve the public type thing. Whatever your ideal superhero kind of is. Unfortunately, we will never get a real life superhero, at least one with superpowers or whatever it may be, but I think there are certain examples that we do have real life superheroes for sure. The people that have a call to distress and help others without expecting anything back. But I was kind of pondering upon the idea of thinking about maybe what it would be like to have like comic book superheroes, you know what I'm saying? Kind of a fun idea. We wouldn't be having people with superpowers, I think, anytime soon in real life, unless science or whatever is whatever happens, human evolution. But superheroes could be like like Batman, It doesn't have to be a superpower, but just think about the normality of that. Just think about like doing your everyday things and something bad happens and Spider-Man comes swooping in or maybe in like a real life scenario, the real universe, we wouldn't have comic book superheroes. We'd have like our own versions, sorry. Kind of like, like the Watchmen, right? Even though Dr. Manhattan is kind of is a being of whatever, a being of power, of energy. But that'd be kind of crazy to think. Just people to come and kind of save us. People need saving. There ain't no doubt about that. But I think a lot of times people kind of have to do it on their own. But even if it was like, because we also like in comic books and when we watch movies, often superpowers have like secret identities or superheroes have secret identities. So it's kind of funny to think about would they always be a superhero? It's kind of we got it kind of in like The Boys, right? That show where you kind of see it like a human side to superheroes a little bit, that they're these celebrities in a way, very much so used as like public defenders. But it's probably as extreme things do happen in the world that they probably aren't going to be doing extreme things all the time. They put they probably won't be saving the damsel in distress or stopping the train from falling off the tracks all the time or the building from collapsing. It happens, but if there was like a lot of superheroes, it feels like everything would be kind of, kept up on. all the plights of people would be taken care of, quelched. So there probably is a question of like, I guess, would they have to have like part-time jobs? Or they would just be doing mundane tasks like they're still under the public servant thing, maybe, the public defender more so, maybe. Not a public servant necessarily, but just walking around just like a normal cop, like patrolling the streets or helping an old lady with her yard work or something. Something like that. Helping the Ben and Jerry's truck, unload the food. It's it's not going to always be exciting, I think, to be a superhero. Like I said, if you had powers, you can kind of just have fun with that. But if you're just someone that dresses up in a costume with crime fighting abilities or the tools to do that, to do such. But it's also one of those things where they probably would, if they were real people like us, it would probably be a certain monetary compensation, right? You'd hope you get a little paid for something, or at least taken care of. You'd imagine that, at least in my mind, that if there were like superheroes flying around and saving everybody and protecting us and doing things for us, it would be nice to take care of them. But it's only to an extent that they're helping us, I guess. You'd think, like I said, the extreme things that like a super villain or an alien invasion, the bad things. So they wouldn't be helping me pay my bills, I'd imagine, or helping me like buy groceries or not dealing with a breakup or something like that. That's not their job. So, pay them for the work they do. When you save a few lives, you probably should get fairly compensated. Stop the bridge from collapsing, few, a couple million. I don't know. At least a nice like place to live in. Anytime you walk in to get food, it's like free. Whenever I think of like superheroes, I don't think of like the everyday doing your thing, like as a regular person, I can't think of that craziness, that's why we have comic books and movies and video games and stuff like that. But also probably they probably it's probably more realistic that they would be overused, maybe. Some heroes would probably feel burnout. They need a little vacation time, a little PTO. And there's enough bad things that it feels like there would be they'd be occupied, especially if there wasn't a whole lot of superheroes, if every country didn't have like certain number of them. Like maybe it was like a Justice League, right, where it's just task force of all these great powers put together, and they serve not only Earth but also the whole galaxy and beyond type thing. Crazy. Yeah, it's I guess a big responsibility to be a superhero, huh? But also, if there was the possibility of superheroes, that maybe there is the possibility of people being born with powers, right? Get a little, fantastical for a second, think a little bit deep like that. Or do you earn your powers? Not all superheroes are born with powers, right? Like, Superman is an alien from another planet, so he was kind of born with his powers. He was just it's his race of Kryptonians or whatever. But then, like, Batman doesn't have any powers. Spider Man got bit. Daredevil got radioactive waste thrown in his eyes or whatever. So I guess, like, if it would be the possibility of them having powers, right? Maybe even like I said, you don't have to have powers to be a superhero. You're a superpowered being if you have superpowers. Superhero is just someone who's protecting people and serving people. I would like a power. I would like a superpower. You know, I always think like telekinesis. Maybe that's too like dumb. I want to be like Doctor X from X-Men a little bit. Also, flying would be kind of cool. I'd love to fly. It would be, I don't know how useful. I wouldn't have any other power maybe, but just have that one thing. Or get like, how like Marvel has these random superheroes with just random abilities. Stan Lee was just throwing things at the window for a while there. So, but hopefully that'd be kind of cool to get. Hopefully I don't have to get bit by a spider or have to go through some crazy thing to then gain a power. Like maybe one day it's like Sky High, right? The main character in Sky High is a teenager who has two superpower parents, superhero parents with superpowers, but he's not born with it. He has to like develop it, like puberty type thing. Or is it, like The Shining, like in The Shining, the book The Shining? It's a thing that everybody's born with, or like the Force, everybody's born with it, but some people can channel it a little bit more. But it's you would hope that it would be a pretty utopic thing where it's always a good scenario, and we always kind of look for that. We hope that we wish that there were superheroes to come save us and stuff. At least for me, people to actually deal with like some serious evils in the world and some danger, like the things that we read about in the news, and you hear about all these crazy events, and you wonder like prevention there could have been, if any. Sometimes there's really none. But also with superheroes, that means supervillains, right? So that's scary. It almost feels like, because we have superheroes, that if we had superheroes, obviously, that means that indefinitely there's going to be bad things to happen. Why would you need these protectors to come in? Because something bad's going to happen. So we would have probably supervillains, right? People had powers, then inevitably, undoubtedly, that others wouldn't be so helpful. They'd be more, trying to hurt others, and something, as we know that as people, when kind of the whims of existence, and sometimes you feel great about yourself and you get along with others, and sometimes you don't feel so great about yourself and you don't like others. So I think they would just be as affected as everybody else. Just because you got superpowers doesn't mean you got super emotions. Maybe that's your superpower though. But it feels like there's some super villains out there, right? We kind of think of like, even though it's cool to think about what like Elon Musk does and all that kind of cool stuff, but I mean, colonizing Mars is a little spooky, and I mean he's very immersed in rockets, and so it's a little spooky. Although we've already villainized all kind of the billionaires of the world and politicians, it would be they'd be the supervillains in our epic lore, or whatever, our tale. But we do have, I think, honestly, we may not have superheroes outright, but we have actual heroes. I think you got to give a lot of credit to people that serve as police officers or are firefighters and serve in the military. People that work as doctors and work as EMTs. So, or sometimes like you just don't work those occupations, or you just aren't in those fields, but you're still a person who's always willing to help, someone who's willing to protect and overstep themselves so that others feel better. So you got to give a lot of credit to people that, like a superhero, someone that calls to a distress, they want to help others and defend people. And I think real humans like us, the people that exist on this world, that there are people that are like that. They may not have superpowers, right? But they have those super instincts. You just gotta it's amazing, you gotta let people be who they are. And, and people are amazing in that way. And like I said, you don't have to be a police officer or go in the military or be a firefighter to be a hero. Sometimes just being there for people, like I said, you could be your kid's hero or your wife's hero or your husband's hero or whatever, your community's hero. Always looking for helping others, right? Making sure that everybody's okay, and you don't expect anything back. You don't expect that you're going to get some sort of payment, or someone's not always going to show up for you too. You kind of have to do things just knowing that this is what people need, that people need help, and you shouldn't think beyond that. Kindness isn't a reciprocated thing. That it's you want it to be reciprocated, but it's kind of something that you give. So it's like when you help others and you try to be that person, you don't look for the glory, you just look for that possibility, that responsibility, and giving yourself to others. I think that's really what being a superhero is just those sacrifices you make. Not just in like what's taking being taken away from you, but what you're willing to give to others. There's plenty of superheroes out there. Would you live forever? Maybe if it meant that you lived in like perfect health and had plenty of money, then maybe. I sometimes think about the possibility of living forever, but under some other nefarious circumstances, then probably not, right? It wouldn't be your choice, maybe how you live forever, right? So imagine, one night you're walking out, it's dark outside, you're all alone, and someone comes out of the bushes and attacks you, and all of a sudden you feel arc these really deep daggers into your neck or whatever, and you're like, oh, woozy. You barely make it home away from the attack, and through the night, some weird transformation happens, and all of a sudden, you're a vampire. Yeah, well, there you go. Get to live forever, I suppose. You're eternal as a vampire, but it comes with other circumstances. Unfortunately, it kind of feels like now you're kind of cursed. Before, you used to be able to go out in the daylight. You weren't really that scared of wooden stakes, silver, or whatever else vampires are scared of, but now it's a little different. You used to be able to get splashed with holy water, but now it's a whole different. Now you got to worry about it. Can't even go near a cross. I was thinking about that. I was thinking like I would love to live forever, but if it meant that I was like a vampire, I had to sell my soul or something like that. It would be I would have it'd make a lot less of a desirable idea. So I was kind of pondering upon that idea of becoming a vampire. Crazy idea. Whatever you may believe, whatever if that's something that you think is a real thing, or maybe that there at one time was vampires, then that's what you believe. I don't think I necessarily believe in vampires, but it's definitely a fun thing to think about. I enjoy every single vampiric movie or whatever, or a game that has vampires in it, or whatever it may be. Dude, to think about like that eternal life is the only thing that seems appealing to me. I definitely don't want to have to like become a vampire. However, that entails, right? It's always kind of you either get bit or you drink the blood of a vampire. Some people be going to weird parties, man, and you never know what happens in those back rooms, man. People becoming vampires, drinking each other's blood. That's gross. Just the smell of iron. That's nasty. But also, I wouldn't imagine it wouldn't be that pleasurable. I'd feel like maybe you're dying. Every vampire that I feel like it's depending on I guess what media you go based off of, but they all look a little sickly sometimes. Or if it's like the movie The Descent, they're kind of vampires. They're not really vampires. They're like these weird evolved cave dwelling humans, but they kind of have vampire characteristics. They're kind of like it a little bit. So that's a nasty transition right there. Changing over, it's like this all of a sudden you feel this thing, this force, this thirst for blood, this love of the darkness or whatever grow out your, veins. Ow. Grow like I said, it depends on if you're like Nosferatu or are you like Lestat from like Queen of the Damned or whatever, or are you like the Descent vampires monster things? Probably, hey, at least you get to live forever, dude. Yeah, it seems very unpleasurable in that way. I can't in the idealistic way. I would want to be one of the underworld's vampires. All of them are just like very good looking people outside of just Kate Beckinsale. You know what I'm saying? Like she's a great representation, but every single vampire in that movie is just incredibly good looking, or like Twilight, right? In Twilight, they just pick all these beautiful humans, right? Is that who only people that can become vampires is beautiful people? Beautiful people get to live forever. Well, I guess I'm not qualified to be a vampire then. I'll just walk myself out of this conversation. Well, I definitely maybe some of the abilities wouldn't be that bad, right? Maybe thinking about you get to I don't if you get to fly, hopefully I don't have to turn into a bat to fly, but that seems pretty cool. Sometimes they got like superhuman like abilities like super strength or like super speed, teleportation, right? It depends on what like I said, it depends on what your vision of the vampire is. There's a game called Vampire Masquerade, I think, and it's a vampire game where you get to choose different types, different factions and stuff like that, and that's pretty cool. I've never played it, but I've seen gameplay on it, and it's such a big game that it feels like it's just a lot to invest in. I love deep games like that, but I try to limit myself as much as possible. But trying to think of some more positives of that, of the vampireness. You get to, some people don't want to live forever, truly. And it's scary to think about outliving all your loved ones, but I'm someone that thinks about like the future of the world. You kind of are limited, I guess, to living a certain way when you're infected. You can't go outside during the day, right? Unless you're like covered up. Like I said, the holy water thing, the I'm not, wooden stakes. Probably a little spooky, you know, for vampires. I can do that. I can dig on all that stuff right now. I can make wooden stakes in the daylight while sitting next to holy water while it drizzles on top of me. So, but the eternal life is maybe appeasing. All of them are always so rich too, so you're kind of building up the wealth right over time, and these you accumulate all this kind of fortune. You accumulate treasures, right? Depending on how you move around the world, and maybe like right now things 200 years from now will seem pretty cool and artifactual or what not artificial but artifacts like artifactual whatever. I was trying to make up a word. But you would accumulate all that stuff. You get to like depict, how you live and where you live, and you get to kind of move around, and undoubtedly probably people would question that, right? You kind of show up and you're somewhere for a few years, and although everybody else is kind of getting older, and they're like, "Well, you just don't look different." Oh, it's just genetics. I've got those Ralph Macchio genes. Ralph Macchio hasn't aged since Karate Kid, since The Outsiders. But that's like I said, those are all kind of the things of that's the fun things, I guess, of being a vampire, right? Is you get to live a long time, and you have some of these superhuman abilities and accumulate a little fortune and all these treasures, and you get to maybe live in a nice castle, really feed into the vampire vibe. But you have family at one time, right? And you get infected. They don't get infected, so you outlive them. Also, kind of effect on others. You kind of maybe have to go disappear. You can't let people know. You can be around people at certain times of the day, but you can't be around them when you want to drink blood, when you want to feast. Can't be feasting on family now. I don't think that's okay. Just my opinion. I don't think that's okay. You're just gonna have to you outlive everybody and outlive a lot, a lot. I mean, not even just your own family, but people that you grew in this area around or whatever. I think a lot of times, it almost sometimes even feels like that vampires are looking for an ultimate end. I feel like it would be kind of a curse. Not it's more so you're getting bit and then transformed into something, supernatural. It's a curse. So, hey, hopefully that there's some sort of vampire hunter out there named Buffy coming looking for you, ready to end you, ready to kill you. And hopefully you're not a menace, and hopefully that's another thing. Would you just like lean into the evilness and you just be luring people back to your place? You'd have to feast on blood. I mean, as we know vampires to be, you don't have to kill the whole human, but then you turn. It's like a domino effect. It's one person you have to feed, so then you try to hold out, but I don't know. Maybe you got the good hookup at the local hospital and get into the blood donations before everybody else. Yeah. Well, then that's maybe one thing you could do is over time you build up, some sort of wealth. You got to have a real job as a vampire. You can't just be a vampire. You got to have things to do. Maybe you went to law school or went to medical school or I don't know. It's funny. How would would you just have like a series of jobs and hopefully because you can't work for the same company for too long. Like I said, you can't live in a place for too long. So kind of feels like a lot of the bad things about being a vampire outweigh the very little perks. Like I said, it feels like it would be a curse. It feels like becoming a vampire would be a curse, but nonetheless, something kind of spooky to think about. The one appeasing thing truly is to think about living forever or living at least for a long time. But I don't think anybody's coming becoming a vampire anytime soon. Just make sure you avoid people with fangs. And even if you're like, oh, vampires aren't real, avoid those people. I'm talking about fangs though, not canines. I got canines. But I'm talking about fangs. Avoid those people. Hey, come back to my castle and in the woods. Nah, I'm good. I'm okay. What's your name, Vlad? I'm good. Yeah, but that's it. It's I don't want to become a vampire. We ain't becoming vampires anytime soon. Alrighty, friends. That's really all I have to say about that. Episode 26 done. Appreciate y'all tuning in. If you want to listen to this episode or any of my episodes, you could always go on YouTube or Spotify and search up the Odd Thoughts podcast. Listen to them. I would appreciate it if you gave any of my episodes a listen. If you found it relatable or even enjoyed it just a little bit, then I'd appreciate it if you subscribe to the podcast. Also, following me on all my social medias. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. That also helps me out a lot. But I always appreciate the chance to get on the microphone and talk to everybody. And I even if it's two people or 10 people, 500, however many people it may become one day. I just hope that it gives a little comfort to people. Anyways, I love y'all. Thank you for tuning in.
Sending this one out.
Please show up for yourselves every single day and be excellent to each other.